we're revisiting the legislation. When we last left, there was the tethering law, which is what we're going to look at.
Yeah,
and we're looking at the number of animals a person could own, and also breed-specific language. And I've got, and I'm sure everyone else on council got a ton of emails for breed-specific language, whether it's for it or against it. So,
and I was told at the last council meeting that the two resolutions were separate. I mean, council members were adamant. And when I spoke with Mr. Limmer, asked why this ordinance wasn't having its first reading, and he says that's because a Pullman Village resident is threatening to sue the village, and these resolutions are now linked. Now that's what he told me just a little bit ago, and I do not understand that. Either they're separate or they're together. They can't be both, and everybody has agreed that they're separate. So I'm not understanding why the tethering ordinance is not having.
I'll tell you why. If you're going to sue us, anything that we say with regard to this meeting, you can use in the lawsuit. You said you were going to sue us.
I did not say I was going to sue you.
And I'd like the council or solicitors to comment on that. Because anything we say here can be used in the pending lawsuit. Are you going to go against this for damages, emotional damages?
Mr. Limmer, I did not say I was going to.
He didn't say that.
Somebody said
it wasn't Jason.
But somebody in your party representing your position.
So you made the statement that the two resolutions were separate.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Sorry, I always thought they were linked.
No, you are.
The legislation committee.
The legislation committee made it clear that these were two. If you look at the original proposition, there are two separate resolutions, and it was made very clear to me that these were two separate items. And now that you're telling me, because a resident is upset that you want to limit the number of dogs that they can own to 3, that we can't talk about the dog tethering ordinance. So now your words to me...
I'm saying that the lawsuit will hinder us in defending us against your lawsuit if we say something here that was beneficial to you. You have to say whether you're going to sue us or not.
But I've never said...
So we should, somebody there, the resident over.
But what does that have to do with the tethering ordinance?
It has to do with the whole situation. We can't separate it.
Yeah. Anthony, I don't know if you saw what was presented at the last meeting. I mean, there were two separate resolutions. I do not understand.
They were presented in, the legislation committee is still working it together, so we're not going to answer that question to you tonight. We're still working it, and one of our parties isn't even here, so we're working on that.
So my question again is, why is the dog tethering ordinance not up for first reading?
We're not going to discuss it because you're going to sue us.
As I've made it clear, I'm not going to sue the city.
Well, somebody's going to sue us.
I said my attorney was going to be present at the next meeting.
I asked you directly, sir, and you said you were going to sue us.
I did not. I said I did not want to sue. I wasn't here to sue. I was here to resolve this. And it means having my attorney present and to hear what's being said, because we've already heard now something entirely different than we heard at the last meeting. And that's why I want my attorney here.
I mean,
and is he here?
Yeah, he will be shortly. I told him 7:30. I was under a misunderstanding. I thought the first phase that started at 7 was not to discuss this. So
Well, I'd like our counsel to
well, if I may just finish.
Well, I just wanted to internally decide. I mean, if they said, and they did say they were going to sue us, whether our debating this here, they could use anything to say in the pending lawsuit against us. And they could not only go for damages against the money, emotional damage. So it's a real threat that they're going to sue us. And he said he would sue us.
I see Attorney Shepard has joined us. Hi, Attorney Shepard. So I'm not sure what happened at the last meeting. I'm getting bits and pieces, and I do know that this has kind of morphed into its own being. These ordinances, when it originally came up for discussion, there were 3. I'll wait.
We'll wait until they're done.
Yeah. So when we first started talking about this, gosh, a while ago now.
Yeah, I think it was maybe April or May.
There were 3 separate subjects. The first one was the tethering. The second one was the breed discrimination. And the third one was the anti-bestiality discussions. And I talked to counsel at the time, and my feeling was that the anti-tethering seemed simple enough. The breed discrimination was a little bit tougher. And the bestiality, I didn't think we were going to touch catch that, to be honest with you.
Anthony, what was the last one?
The anti-bestiality ordinance.
The state just passed a law on that, though, that covers it.
So I said, let's put that one off. Let's focus on the anti-tethering, seems fair enough. And then, you know, I've read a lot about the breed discriminatory language, and you know, we've been bombarded with both sides in the past couple of weeks, really. Stories of pit bull attacks and stories of pit bulls being great companions. So, but that's a legislative determination. It's not for me to decide. I researched the legality of these ordinances, and certainly the tethering ordinance is legal. The breed ordinance seems to be legal as well, although the state of Ohio has spoken on it. But it seems to be within the discretion of each entity to determine these things. It's just, what does the entity decide? Well, somewhere in all that came this, the number of dogs. And it came out of legislation, because I was not aware of it prior to our discussions. So the last meeting I came to in November, the discussion was, well, now we have an ordinance that we're going to propose about limiting dogs. And I did read over it, the proposal, and it limits the number to 3. And again, I researched the legality of it first, and it is legal to do this. There are a lot of areas in Ohio that, you know, 3, 5, 7, 8, there's no amount that seems to be the consensus. It's just an entity has an ability to regulate how many animals, how many dogs they own. Never saw cats there, actually, now that I say that. You know, maybe the cat lovers are a stronger group. But, so, it was my understanding, again, that these ordinances were going to be considered by council, that there would be readings and there would be public discussion. So I assumed that 3 of them were going to be discussed: the tethering, the number of dogs, and the breed discriminatory language. And that's when I came tonight, and now I'm getting the information that, you know, we're not going to discuss them because allegedly, you know, we may have legal consequences if we do this. I will say that I don't, off the top of my head, you know, without seeing the legislation or hearing it proposed, I don't know that challenging one ordinance is going to prejudice the council from considering another ordinance. Or I don't know that in looking at the 2 ordinances as they kind of are being talked about, the passage or the consideration of a tethering ordinance, I don't think would subject the village to any consequences or anything legally that would hurt if we would be sued over a breed discriminatory ordinance or a number of dogs ordinance. I think they are their own separate entities. So, you know, I don't know, without hearing council talk about it, I don't think that I would say you guys can't talk about these ordinances and discuss how you feel or discuss where legislation is or anything like that.
I think I can clarify things a little bit. At the end of our last meeting, after listening to people speak and giving it some thought, members of the legislation committee had some second thoughts about the one aspect of that legislation.
Okay. Well, then that changes
the number of dogs specifically. So we decided that the legislation committee needed to meet again, revisit it, and rewrite it, and then present it to council. That's why it's not here today.
Now I understand.
Because legislation committee has not had the opportunity to meet. One member is absent. It's only a 3-member committee, and it just doesn't function properly with only 2 people.
But that is the
But let me continue. So we decided that we would meet again, and Leah has informed me that she would be available for a meeting on Monday the 12th at 9 o'clock in the morning, if that would work for you. And then we could revisit all this.
I think the 12th is not going to be good. The 12th, what's it?
Is a Monday.
No, it's not going to be good for me.
And I will say this much, that makes perfect sense. And until legislation comes out of legislation, then there is nothing for the council to consider, discuss, or to be proposed. It's not that anyone can force a council to make a law. You can certainly bring folks and talk about why laws should be passed and considered. But until they get there, then you know, they're
But
probably.
has council seen I mean, I know you've gotten a lot of emails from residents in Poland Village and outside Poland Village that are fully against limiting the number of dogs that a person may love. And to consider this legislation is just, it's harmful to the people of this village. I think it's disrespectful to the people of this village, and it also harms these rescues that are trying to home these dogs. Who are we to say that one person can only own 3 dogs? I mean, I know people that own 1 dog and treat them horribly, and they chain them up, they beat them, they don't feed them. I know people that have 10 dogs, 12 dogs, 15 dogs, and they're loved and cared for. I just don't understand why this guy interjected into what was supposed to be a simple tethering ordinance and simple removal of 1 line from your codified ordinances declaring pit bull terriers as vicious. That is all I came here to ask for. And then what I feel, Mr. Limmer took offense that I have 8 dogs and certainly feels that I shouldn't have 8 dogs. And one of the meetings he said I should get rid of some of my dogs, which I took offense to. So I really just think we should get back to what I came here for. I mean, I go to municipalities all across the state of Ohio. I've come to this now, city council, I think 5 or 6 times, trying to get this ordinance passed. Campbell tomorrow is having their first reading of their tethering ordinance. Last meeting, it was said that there would be a first reading of this tethering ordinance. I do not understand why revisiting the 3-dog limit has anything to do with this tethering ordinance.
I will say this, if I could, 2 things. One, it sounds like legislation is going to consider the number as a subject of their discussion, which is very good. In my reading of these laws, the thing that I came away with was, rather than having arbitrary numbers, the most efficient way and effective way of dealing with this situation is talk about the care that a dog owner must give to their dogs, that they can't be excessively loud, that they can't make nuisances so the number is irrelevant. Then you actually have more authority, because you can say 1 dog, like you're saying, of an owner can be punished, you know, and so could someone who owns 5 or 6. It's not the number of dogs, it's the way that the dogs and the owner handles the dogs.
And that's precisely why I've reconsidered what I felt before, because we presently have sufficient laws to take care of the problems that we thought came along with numerous dogs, like filth and noise and other things that could bother your neighbors. Those laws exist. The number of dogs, in my mind, is irrelevant, and I've changed my mind about it.
And I'm thankful to hear that.
Yeah, Youngstown has a limit of 3 dogs.
Again, as I stated in the last meeting, it's...
And the point is this, you are grandfathered in. Anybody who has dogs is grandfathered in. We're not taking any of the dogs away. Indeed, it could be written that if you have 5 dogs and 1 dies, you're entitled to the old law to apply to you. So it's not going to affect you at all. You're going to be grandfathered in, and if the gentleman the other day said 1 dies, well, we'll write the laws that you're able to be under the old law and keep the 5 dogs.
And what if 1 were to die and he wants to adopt a bonded pair of dogs, and that gives him to 6? What are you going to say now? No, you're going to have to separate these dogs because you can only have 5? I mean, like he said, I think this number, it's irrelevant. Let me help you focus on laws to make sure that the people are caring for their dogs.
Why does Youngstown have a 3-dog limit?
As I said at the last meeting, it is not a 3-dog limit, it's a 3-dog limit per lot. So if an individual has a double lot, they can have up to 6 dogs. So, you know, we're talking about property space, and, you know, that's another thing that sometimes comes into factor with these legislations is how much property, even though I don't agree with it. But yeah, a double lot is 6 dogs, a single lot is 3 dogs. So, you know, Boardman doesn't have one, and I don't live in Boardman anymore. I moved to Brookfield, but I'm sure my neighbors were ecstatic. But you know, but they don't have a resolution addressing the number of dogs. But they have noise ordinances. They have zoning regulation to make sure, you know, they have the health department to make sure the dogs are being picked up after. You know, we have dogs at large laws. You know, we have leash laws. We have all these law tools in place that we can make sure that these owners are caring for their dogs properly. And I don't think by saying, let's limit the number to X number of dogs, that's going to be...
Jason, the thing I would ask is this, and I don't know your answer, I'm sorry.
Dave McElroy.
Nice to meet you. is let's not jump to conclusions and worry about things that haven't happened yet. This is why we do this, because legislation gets together, they talk about it, they hear people's input, and then they go write laws. And even then, they're not the law yet. So whenever they're done, they'll come out with something, and then we can talk about it. And if we want to argue, I'll be somewhere else. No, I'm teasing.
Well, I think Anthony, I think the thing that was upsetting is that this proposed amendment was actually scheduled for a first reading.
But it's not, so we're good.
So we're good now.
It was not scheduled. It was talked about, it was discussed, it was proposed, it was not scheduled.
So-
Nothing gets scheduled unless it's put on the agenda. It was not
So
on
it's
the
back
agenda.
in committee and they're reconsidering, and I'm happy with that. I'm sure Mr. McElroy would like to say a few words because he has a whole lot. You have
I'm
nothing to say?
not looking for trouble, but what I am looking for is the ability to adopt dogs. That's the biggest reason limiting, I think, is a problem, because so many people like me are the ones that will take on additional animals, and it'll always be within our means, and you will never have a problem with my dogs. And that's the case with most people like me. I mean, I know some people that have far more than my 5, and if I saw the right little dog that came along, I would want to adopt it, to save it. And we don't have children anymore, so now we can have the other kind. And that's why I object to the limitation. I mean, if we have people that do not take care of their dogs, don't feed them, don't clean up after them, run wild, I'm all for it. I am not for that type of behavior.